Hablo no español. That, my friends, is the phrase that I use most often on my recent trip to Havana, Cuba. What an amazing country. I'll share some thoughts sprinkled out today and on future episodes. If you ever had an interest, it's worth going. Well, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney, your host, and this is the show dedicated, obsessed with helping you not just survive retirement. We want you to rock retirement. And so today's episode, we are finishing up our series on relocation in retirement with a discussion about how do we make a successful transition. We've decided what we want to do. We've tested out locations. We're ready to get the ball rolling. How do we do this without beating ourselves up or beating each other up with stress when moving is such a stressful thing to do? So that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. But we can't do any of that until we have that all-important disclaimer. Helpful hints and education, that is what this is. What this definitely is not is advice of any sort. I can't give you advice. Come on, man. I don't know you. You don't know enough about me. How can I give you advice? So before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, your financial advisor, because that's just common sense. Now let's go talk about purging. So in this hot topic segment, we got to have an honest discussion here. If you're like me, you probably have lived in your home for a number of years, probably raised your family in that home, and let's face it, you got a bunch of stuff. Maybe you got some crap in there too. I know I do when I walk around the house. This will happen periodically. I'll be looking for something and I'll have to venture into my attic or into the garage and get overrun by stuff. The old bike box that I used when I did my half Ironman over 10 years ago, hasn't been used since, is always in the way. Speakers that we don't use anymore, clothes, books, stuff is coming out of my ears. The big box of virtually every drawing that my daughter did between the ages of 2 and 7, that how could you throw that away? And I trip over it, or it spills out. Oh, or my closet, right? All the work clothes that have accumulated. Some of the things I'm like, wow, did I really wear that? Stuff, old electronics, old cell phones, stereo stuff that nobody uses, that's just there, cluttering my life and my house. There's a whole industry on how to declutter. And since we're talking about making a successful transition, if you're going to move, we got to talk about the purge. How do you purge yourself from all of the things that you've accumulated in this home, not just simply to stage your house well, but to right-size your material existence? So obviously some of the benefits of purging, especially when you're relocating, you got what? Less to transport, right? Less to load up in your truck or your pod or in the movers to move. You have less packing. You can earn some cash by purging, assuming you're not donating it. I did this a year or two ago. We had a pool table that nobody used. Right before Christmas, put it up. I got $900. A family got a great pool table that was barely used to play with because they had the right size kids, and I got $900. Cell phones. I sold some old iPads. That stuff's worth money. You get a fresh start. That's a good benefit. And probably the biggest benefit is while you're going through this transition, which is always listed as the top 10 most stressful things to do, less stress, less stuff you have to try to figure out where to move around and where to put. So how do we do this purge so we can set ourselves up for a successful transition? That's what we're talking about here in this hot topic segment. Well, one, you got to start early. There's nothing worse than purging when you're under the gun? Well, you just entered that stress back in. You're going to end up donating it all or keeping it because you don't have time to maybe sell some of it. Start early. I'm on this I haven't been as diligent, but I'm trying to pick a room a month to purge. And I picked my office space up here, the RAM World headquarters, where I got rid of stereo equipment, old games, just tons of stuff. It feels good. But you want to start early so you don't put pressure on yourself. So that's number one. Number two, consider using the 3-box system. And one box is to keep stuff. I definitely got to keep that. One box is the donate stuff. Definitely want to donate that. And the third box is the sell stuff. Things that you may be able to monetize and also give forward to others. Start with those 3 boxes. I think the 3-box system is a good idea. And then go room by room. That's the third tip. Go room by room. Don't try to do too much. It could literally be just starting with a junk drawer. It could be as simple as that. And the next tip is, here are some questions you can ask yourself as you're looking at an item. So we had this wooden ship that was a replica of like the Mayflower. Okay. And it wasn't valuable. It was actually a table ornament at a conference that I went to with my family when we all did a 2-week road trip to San Diego, and my son loved it and they allowed us to have it. That's been sitting in our house for 15 years. There's some sentimental part that is, you look at it and you hear and you see the story behind him grabbing it, us going to ask. They say, yes, of course you can take that, little guy. How can you throw that away? We did. So question number 1 is, when's the last time you used this? Or it could be clothes that you've never worn. Even if they have tags still on them, yeah, you know who I'm talking to. Even if they have tags still on them, if you've never used them, say in the last year, chuck it. Here's a sad one. When's the last time you knew you had it? Right? We probably have some cool things buried somewhere, and you're going through, say, cleaning out the garage, and you find, I don't know, some cool knick-knack or yard game. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I had this. I need to play this. That's going to be the trap for you to keep it. You didn't even know you had it. Unless you seriously are going to play that, chuck it. Next, you can ask yourself, can you digitize it? So I'm thinking about this like with my daughter's artwork. Maybe I go through the process of digitizing the very best ones so I can keep them and they don't rot and still look back and live the memory without having to have the stuff. There's a lot of things we can digitize. Tax returns, records. Another question to ask yourself is, do I really need this? Where I've run into that is typically in the garage. I remember I was putting gutters on a house that we owned, and there's this I'm not a very handy man. I forget what they call it. Like a riveter, right? It's like a hand thing. You put the rivet in the thing and you clamp it down and it rivets, I guess. I did that like 12 years ago. The tool, Lord knows what it cost. When is the next time I'm actually going to rivet again? But it's a perfectly good tool that I needed for a very specific job in a very specific period of time. And I've kept it because, hey, you never know when you're going to need to rivet again. Yeah, I do. I'm not going to rivet again. Do you really need it? And then the last question that you can challenge yourself is, has that season passed in your life? And that could be sports equipment and sports you can no longer do and probably shouldn't be doing anyway. It could be clothes. No, you really shouldn't wear those pants ever again. My wife had... What makes me think of that is my wife, I forget where we were, and we were walking, and she's like, Roger, you need new jeans. She doesn't like any of the jeans. She says they're all baggy. They look like I'm carrying a load in my pants. And she says, you need to upgrade your jean game. She says, you do not need to be wearing those jeans. They just do not look good on really anybody. So has that season passed? And that's where it comes to clothes, right? Trendy things, they're worn out. When's the last time you wore them? Purge those things. You got cords, power cords, chargers for things you haven't had in years. Books. Now, this is a hard one. Books. Because I have a little bit of a passion for books. And I remember we went through about 5 years ago and purged a ton of books. and took them to half-price books. I think the kids did all the work and they earned like $200. That's a lot of books. That's a lot of books if you've ever sold a book at half-price books. I've since started to accumulate more books. What I did was, so if you have a big collection of books, the way I decided which books to sell and which books to keep were the ones that were truly meaningful for me or to me, that just have a special place in my heart. And a couple I can think off the top of my head are Atlas Shrugged, the Bible, obviously, Linchpin, The One Thing. Those all they really helped change my life. So I'm going to keep those. And I'm probably getting close to a book purge party again because I've accumulated a lot more books. But books are a big one. I mean, and you think about storing, packing, carrying. Yeah, that's a lot of work. And then just all the general stuff that we collect in our house. Now, I like to donate things. I generally will donate things just because it's easy and it feels like you're giving forward. But there are places you can sell things and actually earn a decent amount of money. This is something that I'm learning more about because my normal inclination is not to sell something, but it can be a very valuable thing to do. When I sold the pool table, I sold the dartboard, I sold iPads, iPhones, gadget stuff, using things like eBay, Gazelle. Facebook has a product where you can sell things. Bicycle trainers, OfferUp, which is a more local one. My wife and my daughter are really the masters at this. When it comes to clothes, I think my daughter made like $280 selling clothes, and she just drove around to different places that are resale shops. And depending on what the demand is for, they're willing to pay a decent amount sometimes if you're diligent. But almost anything you have that works, you can offer up. And this is a whole silent economy that a lot of us don't know about. It's not just garage sales anymore. Garage sales have really gone digital. So there are lots of places that you can sell things and really put a lot more money in your pocket than you may realize. In your process of purging, shedding the life of work and raising kids and all the stuff that you've collected in your house. So as you relocate in retirement, you can right-size your life so you can, 1, decrease the stress of moving, and 2, when you arrive in your new place, begin to nest for this new season of life. So I think that's a really important aspect of making a successful transition. Now let's go talk about some other things in the practical planning segment. So in the practical planning segment, I want to wrap up this relocation and retirement with just some thoughts on relocating in retirement and how do you make a successful transition so you can make sure that you are following a path that you are comfortable with and you end up in a place where you actually want to be. One first observation, I may have mentioned this before, but putting two of the most stressful stressors statistically together, retiring, moving, may not necessarily be a good thing. So one thing you consider is, even if you want to relocate retirement, why not do things in order? Sometimes we get so excited about retiring that we just want to go, and put more things in, such as relocating. Okay, on the day I'm retiring, we're packing the car and we're moving down to Florida. Sounds awesome, but under the surface, what you're doing is you're putting two stressful things together, which can lead to a lot of bad decisions, but also a lot of bad emotional trauma that you may be able to spare yourself by just slowing your game a little bit, retiring, settling into who this new version of you is becoming, so you can have a better foundation for deciding on relocating and to pace yourself as you do these two things. I think that's really important because a lot of times when we get gung-ho, oh yeah, and we'll do this and we'll do that, rather than just slowing down a little bit. Now, one important consideration when you're moving is the funding sources. How are you going to exactly do this from a financial perspective? So how are you going to pay for this relocation? Assuming you own your current home either outright or have a mortgage on your own home. Well, first off, if you're going to do a mortgage on the retirement home, one thing you're going to have to be careful about is qualifying for the mortgage. Yeah, maybe you're sitting there and say, what are you talking about? I'm buying a $200,000 home. I got a net worth of $3 million. Ain't going to be no problem. That's how you talk, you know. Well, it could be a problem because, especially after the housing bust, mortgage companies use income as the factor in determining what you qualify for when it comes to a mortgage. And I've run into situations with clients that had assets, liquid assets that could buy the house 5-10 times over and not qualify for a mortgage because they didn't have the income demonstrated to support the mortgage. Pretty crazy, right? Well, that can be a problem if you decide to retire in retirement and you go to qualify for a mortgage and you've already quit your job and you don't have any income to speak of. Now, it doesn't always happen that way because you may have income sources of pension and other things, but you're going to have to be aware of that and figure out how you're going to navigate that. And better to think about that early than later. Now, one thing you can do from a mortgage perspective is you can find companies that do what's called manual underwriting. And all that really means is rather than put you into a mass market financial calculator, they actually have a person look at everything going on and make a decision based on the totality of the situation. Wow. Imagine that, the human touch. And that's what we did in this case, is we contacted a local mortgage company that did manual underwriting and were able to secure a mortgage because they actually looked at the person and they looked at the whole situation. So that's one thing that you can do. So be careful if you decide to go with a traditional mortgage. And then you have to decide, do you pay cash for the house? Do you pay cash? Do you got the cash laying around? Do you just pay cash for the new house because you want to have it all paid off? Do you draw from your retirement account to pay cash for the house? I've seen people want to do that, which can really cause some tax issues early in retirement because that's all that money coming out is considered taxable income. Do you sell your house first and then rent and then buy the new house so you can extract the equity from your current home in order to have the money to buy the new home? Or do you own two homes, right? So there's a lot going on in here that you're going to have to figure out as you navigate this transition. Do you zap a lot of liquidity? Can you qualify for the mortgage? Where are you going to get the money to do all this? Is it going to be from pre-tax accounts? Because now we got tax consequences. Are you willing to sell your house and rent? That's going to be one of the safer solutions or more stable solutions is to sell your home, rent something, and then go buy something. It feels disruptive because now you got to move twice, right? To some extent. How you figure out how you're going to navigate this is going to be really important from a financing standpoint. So I recently had a question from Chris that's very similar to this, and I'm going to read what he said. He says, in my case, I'm looking at relocating to the coast from the DC area. I own my present home outright and am thinking of purchasing the new home and relocating over several years. Thus, we will own two homes for a period of time and am working through the best way to finance the purchase of the new home. We could take a portion of my retirement assets and purchase the new home with cash. We could take out a mortgage on the new property. We could do a home equity loan on our current home to buy the new one and then pay off once we decide to permanently move. I suspect many others are in a similar position and would love your thoughts on this topic. So, Chris, obviously, I don't know your situation. This is a tactical decision, and I haven't gone through a process to come up with a strategy to get to the tactics. All of the options that you mentioned are viable, and it sounds like you're still employed. One, you got to make sure you're comfortable owning two homes and taking on that risk. I think, that can be scary for a lot of people, but you own your current home outright, which mitigates a lot of that risk of owning two homes. So some questions to think about is when you ultimately sell your home to buy the new home, are we talking dollar for dollar or are you buying something that costs less or costs more? Because then, if it's going to cost substantially less, then financing the new house might not be that big of a deal because when you sell your current home, you're going to have more than enough equity just to pay cash for it, regardless of what market prices do in the two respective housing areas, right? So there's going to be some question as to, are we going apple to apple from a cost standpoint, or are you ultimately paying a lot more for this retirement home? The second thought that comes to mind is, Now you're going to have maintenance on 2 homes. So it's not just simply the purchase and financing, but are you able to cash flow and do you want to deal with the maintenance on 2 separate homes? Even if it's because your transition is going to be over other years. You want to make sure you're ready for that journey. Third, another thought is, are you sure this is where you want to retire to? You say over several years. I don't know if that's a year or 2 or 5 or 6. One thing that I've seen happen is people, usually it's with land, they buy the retirement lot in order to build. But I've also seen it in buying a home in anticipation of moving to that home as their retirement home, and then realizing a year or 2 now, no, maybe I don't want to move there. And then pivot and end up having to unwind that transaction. And that can be easy or it can be disastrous depending on markets and how much debt is used and everything else. So I would challenge you, and again, I don't know your situation, is this really where you want to go? And is there a rush to buy it now? Maybe it's because you want to enjoy it now. And do you know the area well enough? And we've talked about that before of, have you spent enough time in this area that you're comfortable with the community, the taxes, the facilities, the services that are around that area? Or is this more of an ideal in your head that you want to live there? Some of that's going to factor in as to, are you comfortable having 2 homes? Definitely having your first house paid off makes this a lot easier. Of all the options that you listed, the one that's least attractive to me is taking the money out of your 401k or retirement account and paying cash. That seems very heavy-handed from a tax standpoint. What I would do is evaluate what is the cost of money in taking a home equity loan on my current house. That's going to be obviously the interest rate, but the closing costs and everything else. And then what's the cost of money if I do the home mortgage? And evaluate those 2 side by side to figure out which one is best for you. My guess is it's going to make sense to take a mortgage out on the second home, finance it for 30 years, lock in a low rate. I wouldn't worry about playing with the adjustable rates. Just lock in a 30-year rate. When you sell your home, you can pay off the new house, or you can decide to build a floor and keep the liquidity. And you can make that decision as a game time decision. You don't have to decide that beforehand, or pay off the mortgage. And I think that will give you some more flexibility rather than doing the home equity loan. So hopefully this gives you some perspective of how to navigate this. Now here's a couple options. If you're thinking about relocating in retirement, is your current house really that bad? Is your current neighborhood really that bad, or services or friend network or whatever else it is? Maybe it's just that you want to explore new places. Now, I understand if you're trying to move from a tax perspective or move closer to family and things like that. And I think of my wife and I, because I've shared this with you. We talk about moving or not moving, and I'm all, let's go. But I'm coming around to more of her thinking of, we have a very well situated home. We love our home. Maybe it's a little bit too big, but we like the yard. We like the ambiance. We like the neighborhood. We like the friends. We live close to a big airport. We live close to great facilities, fairly low tax, except for the real estate tax. And now our plan is to be more of a hub and spoke and go live different places, rent houses in different places of the country where we can play, I can work, we can meet new people and be with people that we're close to all over the country, and always come back to our home base, that paid for house. That's pretty attractive. That way you're not putting so much pressure on picking the right place to go because you're sort of happy where you're at. You just want something new. I mean, obviously, if you're not happy where you're at and you definitely want to leave, then do it. But if there's not something driving you away from where you're at, maybe you just do the hub and spoke for a while and keep your house and go rent a house for a month or 2. It's easier now than ever before to do that anywhere in the world. We did it in Cuba. If I can rent a flat in Cuba to fit 7 guys, I'm sure you could do it anywhere else in the world. Now, an add-on to that, and we've talked about this before, is if you do the hub and spoke and you're renting houses somewhere, you could actually have your own home pay for the things that you do by renting VRBO or Airbnb your home out while you're away. Some people are comfortable with that more than others. Right now, we're not comfortable with that, but we're exploring it. I have friends that do that all the time, and they actually make money because they happen to live in a fairly desirable place. And the last thought on this whole having a successful transition is, it's okay to slow your game and wait. It's okay to stop if you really don't want to do it. I think it's awesome to explore. I think exploring relocation and retirement is a wonderful journey for you or you and your spouse, even if you end up not doing it, because what you're doing is not getting trapped by what is in your life. You're saying, okay, the world is my oyster. I have total freedom to design my environment. Let's go explore what that might look like. And perhaps you'll find it's right where you're at. Or maybe it's right where you're at with a few tweaks. I think the exercise of doing all of this is a healthy one, even if you just stay where you're at. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this series. Let's go chat with Nicole and get happy. Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab, where we noodle on living a happier life. Nicole, hi.
Hi, Roger.
Did you smoke that Cuban cigar that I brought back for you yet?
I did not. I am looking admiringly at the bracelet, but I'm going to have to pass on that cigar.
So it was an amazing adventure in Cuba, and we'll have a highlight video. But when I think of Cuba and I think of the Happy Lab, the one thing that really struck me about the Cuban people, obviously there's a lot of poverty, a lot of lack of opportunity, which is an oddly structured sentence. But I was impressed and inspired by how happy people were and how friendly people were. I felt safer in Havana than I have in some major metropolitan cities in the U.S. The people were very happy, very friendly, and there was a huge sense of community. I'm sure some of that spurred by having to be a community to do well and survive. And it made me think about distinguishing what do we really need versus what we want. And sometimes when we think all these wants that we have are actual needs, it sort of zaps some of the happiness.
Or distractions.
Yeah, because I was 4 days with no phone, no internet, didn't talk to my wife, didn't text my wife for 4.5 days, and I was happier because of it.
I was waiting.
Yeah, I couldn't. I had to hit that one just because it was there. No, but meaning that, I didn't watch a lick of TV, a lick of anything. That's a whole nother story from a happy standpoint of that disconnectedness. The news, I didn't miss anything, and the pace of life was much more relaxed, which was enjoyable.
Peaceful, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some lessons to be learned there. So think about those things and get happy.
On your marks, get set.
Welcome to the Smart Sprint, where we take a 7-day step towards creating a better life and better retirement. And we've been talking about the big purge, the purge of items, things, materials in our home. Even if you're not going to relocate, I challenge you over the next 7 days, pick a room that's been annoying you. It could be your closet, your garage. It could be the pantry. It could be really just not the drunk drawer, but the junk drawer. And clean it up, purge from it. I'm doing this systematically in my house, and it feels really good. So I challenge you over the next 7 days, pick one thing and go do it. Do you have a thing, Nicole? Are you purging anything?
I actually am right now. I realize that, my youngest is in his last year of preschool, and I've got a lot of baby things still that I need to just get rid of.
That stuff can hang around for decades.
Yeah, it lingers. You just find it in odd places.
Yeah, and usually you step on them and say, why do we still own this?
That's Legos.
We were talking about the Cuban community and how happy and supportive they were. Well, we're starting a little community of our own called the Rock Retirement Club, the RRC. We just had a focus group last week. Amazing turnout and amazing suggestions. And we have a landing page to tell you more about it. You can go to rockretirementclub.com and learn a little bit more and get on the waiting list, because Nicole already has a hammer in her hand and we are building the clubhouse, and it is coming in January. Hey, until next week, don't just rock retirement, go rock your life today, all right?
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.